This is Justin.
And this is Haley. You're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize the conversations around money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
The do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom. Hi Toasties, welcome to The Price of Avocado Toast, episode 13.
Whether you're a first-time listener or you've been following us from the start of this thing, we are so glad to have this conversation with you today. This episode is on fire! No, but seriously, it is. This past weekend, we got to sit down with Mike and Maggie from Friends on Fire. They have their own podcast focused on the FIRE movement, which, if you haven't heard of it, is an absolute trip. It is crazy to us to think that there are people out there living like that, but it's pretty interesting. So they have their own podcast, like I said, Friends on Fire. They also do some public speaking centered around this, and they've done some coaching centered around this. So we were super glad to sit down with them. They both work in what Haley and I essentially consider corporate America, and they focus in the finance and marketing realm of that. So they are two brilliant human beings, and it was a blast getting some time to sit down with them and learn more about them and what has lit them on fire. They are one of our followers on Instagram, so go and check them out. They're super tight. We've been following them since we created the account, and so we were so glad we were finally able to sit down and chat with them. Without any more wasted time, let's get into our interview with Mike and Maggie, the Friends on Fire. All right, you guys, we are sitting down today with Mike and Maggie. They are the hosts of the podcast Friends on Fire. You guys, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
So you guys were one of the kind of first follows that we reached out to on Instagram because we were super interested in your guys' content and all of the stuff that you post in your story. You guys are very much transparent as well, which kind of resonates with us because we see a glimpse into your real life, not just these cute Instagram backgrounds. And we also didn't really have much of an idea of what FIRE really was. So whoever wants to kick it off, you're more than welcome to, but just explaining a little bit more to Haley and I, and more so the listeners, what is FIRE exactly?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. Well, Maggie, let me start off with this. So FIRE is something that I've been living my entire life. And so that's where Maggie and I are a little bit different and why we became friends and have kind of a good podcast dynamic. But FIRE is financial independence, retire early. And basically it's saving a ton of money and then quitting your job and being financially independent. But that means a lot of different things for different people. For us, we like the name Friends on Fire, but we're still working. We haven't retired, but we are huge into financial independence and the flexibility that being financially independent gives you in your life to pursue your passions and just be happier.
Yeah, I think Mike said it well. Hey, Mike, there's a strand of hair that I need you to move, or I can't focus for the rest of the podcast. I hope you guys, you don't have to edit that out if you don't want to, but I just was looking at it, I'm like, I wanted to reach through the screen and be like, fix your hair.
Fix your hair.
Even though this is only a voice recording, I have to look at that for the next, okay. But I loved your definition of FIRE, Mike. And I think one of the things that he kind of touched on a little bit is, we tend to focus more on the FI part of FIRE, but Friends on Fire sounded better than Friends on Fi.
Yeah.
So we focus more on the benefits of what we would call financial independence. And like Mike said, it gives you so much flexibility. It's not really about retiring to do nothing. It's more around being able to pursue your passions, not needing to get a certain type of paycheck to keep up a certain type of lifestyle that you've created that's probably heavily inflated. And also I think the idea of financial independence for me gives me a huge amount of confidence and happiness aside from just the flexibility. The feeling and the mindset it gives you is a priceless feeling that is, so hard to get. And you guys know it because you talk about it a lot, but just, it doesn't feel good to be in debt.
No.
Right?
No.
It's not a good lifestyle. It doesn't feel good. And on the opposite, it feels really good to not be in debt and to be, what people define as financially independent.
I love that. So I've listened to your podcast only since like June. Once we started all of our Instagram and really got going, that's when I met you guys on Instagram and started listening. But from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys both grew up in families that led the fire movement, maybe not exactly by the fire name, but they did certain things, or no?
My family was totally different. But Mike, you should talk about kind of how
Yeah,
you grew
so
up.
I grew up with, from like an early teenager, just planning not to work very long in my life because my parents retired at 42. And so
Wow.
um, my dad worked in corporate finance, which is what I do now. Funny how that works out. I didn't start down that path. But anyway, I never really like saw my parents work. I never saw them go into an office. That was not part of my life. And so even though I went down, I went to college, got a master's degree, went into corporate America, it was always my plan to go do something different because that's how I was raised. I think what Maggie and I share is just a general attitude attitude towards frugality, and we share a lot of beliefs about how you should spend and save money.
Yeah, and I grew up, in a regular middle class family. My parents both had just regular jobs. We had enough money. We had food on the table, none of those stresses, but like never really felt like, I think my parents never felt like they had as much money as they wanted, or certainly we didn't have as much money as a lot of the people around us. And so I grew up seeing a lot of people around me with things that I thought I wanted. And I grew up knowing that I was going to have to work hard myself to get it. Like nobody was handing me anything. I mean, one thing I highly appreciate many things about my parents, but is they they sort of raised us with a lot of independence and space. And so, and some of it was because they worked a lot and didn't have time. So we were, like children of the 80s and 90s. We were like latchkey kids. We were doing our own thing. But they instilled a very strong work ethic. They were like, if you want money to do stuff, you need to go get a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so my brother and I both had jobs from very young ages, like early, like babysitting jobs. And then like we both worked at a neighborhood grocery store, and like we got paychecks, and we saved our money. And if we wanted to do things, we had to use our money. And so they instilled a lot of that sort of responsibility and accountability around money with me and my brother. And so I think from an early age, I was very driven to make money, but I was also just sort of naturally frugal, which was, I think some of that I got from my dad even. But I just had a lot of respect and appreciation for how hard it was to earn money. So I didn't want to waste it. And I didn't even know what fire was until a few years ago. I was just frugal, and I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was doing it for. I didn't know my why. I knew I was tired of working. I was just exhausted. I had been working really hard for decades without much of a break. And so I knew I was tired, and I didn't, and I was just always very cautious and frugal with my money, mixed in with some splurging here and there. And I then sort of like found this why and was like, wait a minute, there's like a better end result to why I've been living this way, and kind of what I'm saving for, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think that's kind of ignited, at least for me, like over the summer listening to you guys and stuff, because I didn't have any clue of the fire movement until we started the Instagram page. And then you start to look into it and you're like, oh, like I've thought about like what would I pursue, like what would a passion be, right? And then the immediate thought is, well, I can't do that because I'm not going to be able to live and afford that lifestyle, right? Like we don't live in a world that's like preaches frugality and minimalism and stuff, right? We preach just consumption, and stacking all of these things that don't really commit to that lifestyle. So there's kind of this interesting idea though that I think people might get mixed up on, and that's like, oh, you work really hard and save a lot, and then you maybe quit your job and pursue your passions, and then you just live off the money that you've saved. And I think that that's kind of like a misnomer. So if you guys are comfortable sharing, you certainly don't have to, but just a general idea for like listeners, it's not like that money's just in their bank account, like a general savings account, and they're pulling from that money, correct? Like your money's still working for you in different financial realms, correct?
Yeah, and this is sort of something that I'm not a huge fan of in the fire movement. So it's called the 4% rule. So you withdraw 4% of your investments on an annual basis, and that means you never outlive it. But this is like an overly simplified Instagram view of financial independence. And in my mind, it encourages some of the wrong behaviors about how and where to invest.
Mm.
But the idea behind it is, if you have $1 million in the bank, you would withdraw $40,000 a year, and then the remainder of that continues to grow. And so whatever your annual expenses are, if it's $40,000, you need $1 million in investments in order to safely withdraw that over time. But there are so many different ways to achieve financial independence. And if you just have investments sitting there in taxable accounts, so non-retirement accounts, it doesn't give you an incentive to pay down your mortgage or pay down your debts. It doesn't give you an incentive to go find alternative entrepreneurial avenues to go make money. It just says, go save everything you can, put it in a brokerage account, and invest it in the stock market. And that's not always the best way to do it.
I was just going to say that, just the comment of you said it a second earlier, and then Mike just said it, but just the idea of consumption. And, a big piece of that, the quote 4% rule that a lot of people follow or subscribe to or kind of set their goals based on is around minimizing your lifestyle in a way, right? So like the less you can live on, the less you need every year in that, 4% math or whatever your math is. And I think, that's one of the things that I personally had been shifting my lifestyle towards, regardless of the financial aspect of it, right? It's just like you use that word consumption, right? And I to me lately, I don't know, there's just something that is like negative about the word consumption to me. And in a good way. I mean, like, I don't want to consume a lot, right? The older I get, the more simple I want things in my life, the less physical stuff I want, the more experiences I want, the less commitments I want, right? I don't want to consume a lot. And I think I've just been kind of on this journey towards that. Again, not like, if you take out the financial aspect of it, just these feelings I've been having for years around wanting to consume less, and that feeling like a good thing to me. And I couldn't even put my finger on why. I mean, it's part environmental, it's just part feeling. And the financial aspect to it is just a bonus, right? That it makes my life more sustainable, and it gives me a lot more freedom and flexibility in the future, the simpler I can get my life.
One other thing to add, when you reduce your consumption, so when you reduce your spending, it makes your existing savings go further. So not only, let's say you earn $100,000 and you spend 80, and you're saving 20, let's ignore taxes. If you can be happy spending 40, now you're saving 60. And if you were spending 80 a year, you need 2 million invested in order to withdraw 4%. But if you can cut that down and be happy, consume less, and spend 40, then all of a sudden you only need $1 million. And so while there's a lot of oversimplification about FIRE and what that means to be financially independent, the premise is, if you can be happy spending less and less money, then the money you have goes further and further, and then you don't need to earn as much in the future. And that's why I think it's a popular thing online and in this community, because everybody can find a way to improve their lifestyle and find some level of flexibility or financial independence.
I just love that, because now listening to you guys and having this conversation with the knowledge that we have now, I'm able to look back and think like, wow, we could have done things so much differently if we knew what to do. But we had a $600,000 inheritance 4 years ago that we just blew through, and we talk about that in our first episode. And we didn't know what to do. We didn't grow up with people telling us how. First off, our parents never had that kind of money, and we didn't necessarily have the right money habits. So it was a very toxic relationship with money. But I love that you talk about like living on less than you make, and really just kind of contentment, being content with having less. Just because you make more doesn't mean you need to spend more. Just because we got $600,000 didn't mean that all of a sudden we were rich, we get to just blow it. But that's what we did. And so I just love that concept now, as we have careers now. Every year as teachers, we're going to start making more and more money. And now we finally have a budget that is each month we spend this much money, and it's less than, for the first time ever, less than what we're making. And so as our income increases and we stay at that number, it's going to be cool to watch the magic happen with being able to pay off our debt and being able to really do what we want to and be financially independent.
That's awesome.
And we're young
Yeah,
enough.
and
Yeah.
it's a great word, Haley. You said magic, because it will sort of be like magic once you get those habits in place. Like Mike and I talk a lot about. Well, first off, I love how openly you guys talk about that inheritance, because I've heard you talk about it on your podcast, and just that you kind of like you. I mean, your words, not mine, but you kind of just blew it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not even sure, where it went.
Yeah.
Totally.
And if it makes you feel any better, I once got like a $20,000 inheritance when I was in college, and I also blew it.
Cool.
I'm not really sure where it went, but $600,000.
Yeah.
That's impressive to blow.
Thank you.
Well done. A life lesson in there.
Yeah.
But one of the things when you talk, just back to your comment about kind of magic from here, one of the things that Mike and I talk a lot about and have benefited significantly from is we have avoided lifestyle inflation. We have avoided keeping up with the Joneses, that term.
That's
And
huge.
so we slowly have made more and more money over the year. And one nice thing about corporate America is like you're getting bigger raises many years than you might be in some jobs where it's like very specific pay scale,
like
of kind of
teachers.
what the increase is. Yeah, like teachers and tons of other jobs like government and other jobs where it's like what you're going to get every year. It's always going to be this percentage, and like there's not huge opportunities for it. I mean, there are certainly with certain different types of jumps you can make. But anyways, my point is we never, I don't want to say never, but like for the most part, I never really inflated my lifestyle. I watched everybody around me getting bigger houses, getting fancier cars, putting in swimming pools, just all these things that I could have afforded to do, but I didn't want to, because I was just like, I was slowly realizing that like none of that stuff was actually going to make me happy. And quite honestly, had I not realized that at a younger age, I might have been doing, some of those same things. And Mike always had his end goal in mind. I didn't even have an end goal in mind. I just didn't think that stuff was going to make me happy. And I didn't really desire that. I will say one thing that has been easier for me is I've naturally not always desired really fancy, expensive things. Like I grew up with a pretty simple lifestyle, and I never had to add to it from that, like I didn't have a mom that was like going out and buying, $1,000 purses or something. I didn't have these like habits ingrained in me that were expensive to keep up, I guess, which was a blessing in disguise. Because when you're a kid, you think you want what everyone around you has. Like I used to like give my parents a hard time that like we couldn't go on vacations as fancy as my friends did. And now I feel like, I mean, like what a terrible thing to say to your parents, who are like working their butts off. And I was like kind of a little, I don't know if I can curse on here, but like I was just a little shit at times. Right. And like, it was just rude. And like, if I, it's funny. We'll be like walking around the neighborhood with my kids, and they'll point to like a really big house, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's such a cool house." And I'm like, you guys, that like you have everything you need. Like, is there something that house is going to give you that we don't have? Like, is there something you're lacking in your life that you need? And they'll sort of turn it around where they're like, no, actually we're good, but they're just sort of programmed to like, look at that big fancy house,
Well, and we used to kind of think like that. Like when we first started, when we got the inheritance and we were like looking at homes, like there's two of us and our two dogs.
House.
Yeah, we're looking like $800,000 home in wine country that's like 2,500 square feet. It's like I don't even like yard work. Like I hate maintaining the house, and so it's like why are we gonna go get this space that like you said, like doesn't provide any more for us than what we need? It's just foolish. And kind of going back to your thought, Maggie, about consumption and like not even it just being like a financial feeling, but like just how it feels taking care of the environment. Like we're in California, our entire West Coast right now is on fire. And no pun intended, but I mean, like it's clear that like consumption is really, really hitting us hard. And so environmentally to feel like we're not just taking, and instead like we just have what we need, and that's more than enough, and we're provided for and safe. Like it, beyond just the financial feelings, like that feels good in your soul. And that's a very new idea for us. we did not live like that at all recently, so it feels good.
Most definitely not. We were actually just right before we hopped on this call watching our last Financial Peace University video, because we're leading a course right now, and it was about giving. And a lady standing in her kitchen, she's talking about how she was giving people like $1,000, or I don't really remember what it was for.
Yeah, she was like, I donated $1,000 to this food bank and $2,500 to this food bank,
and Justin's like, wow, look at her kitchen. Like, they're everyday millionaires, and they live in just some basic house with some basic boring kitchen. And I'm like, wow, that's so living underneath what you know, living below your means. And that's what I aspire to do now, because I thought it was just kind of for the rich people. People say FIRE, or, you know, being a millionaire is impossible. Having all this money only happens when you make $200,000 a year, and that's not true. You do not have to be rich to make smart financial decisions and to build your wealth and to really have money that can just continue to give not only to others but your family, because your kids will grow up seeing you living minimally now, then carry that to their families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our kids we're always having these conversations with our kids, and we're trying to explain to them that, like, what they see on the outside, you know, I don't want to judge people. I'm like, I don't know if that person's in debt or if that person isn't, but like half the time my kids are pointing to certain things. I'm like, just so you know, those people are probably in debt to live that lifestyle, and we're not. And I want them to understand this, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, it's not about the kind of car you drive or the, you know, house you live in, or what, you know, just like whether you have fancy jewelry or, you know, whatever. And I think getting to the point where you're content and you can live, like, you can be happy with less, and, you know, even though you can have more, it's nice to have nice things sometimes. It's great to go on nice vacations, etc. And I do it with the best of them, right? But knowing that I am and can be content with very little is a really reassuring feeling to know, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and you can even wear it as a badge of honor. Like, I drive a 2003 Ford Explorer with a tape deck and cloth interiors. And like when I'm going out to lunch with like other, you know, executives at the company, they're like, you know what, I'll drive. Don't worry about it. I don't want to be seen in your car. And I'm like, this thing's sweet. It's super practical. It gets me around. I definitely don't give a shit what people think about it, you know? And so, like, I'm super happy. I've gone to the other extreme. So I'll be honest. Like, I now, when people think like, oh man, that poor guy, like something happened to him and look at the car he has to drive. Like, I'm cool with that. I think it's fun. But, you know, if you can be happy living a modest lifestyle, that's awesome.
Yeah. I think that's one of my favorite parts of your guys' podcast is the random times that Mike's car gets brought up.
Yeah.
It's like my favorite thing. I'm like, oh, there it is again.
He loves it. That car's not going to make it through 2021. I'll say it here now, though.
No, but it's,
you know what, it
still
might.
going now.
You want to make a bet, Maggie?
Oh,
I've never actually been in your car. I also realized, because you're right. Every time we would go out to lunch, I'd be like,
there are spider webs in it.
I've never been
Literally,
in
there
there.
are spider webs in it. I drive it.
Yeah.
I drive like 2 miles to work when I was going to an office, and you know, nobody wants to go with me anywhere. So this thing is.
I love it.
But don't you have a paid off mortgage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we both
So who gives a crap what kind of car you drive? That's where I'm like, you guys both have your homes paid off. Who cares if you have spider webs in your 2003 Explorer?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the life. I mean, in California especially, I know it's much different than in Georgia, like the pricing wise, but still, I don't know very many people other than my grandma who's built her house 40 years ago who own their home outright because they cost so much money. So that is so cool. We will be there someday.
Agreed. What do you guys say? Like, what is your response when people say like, oh, hey, like I can't do the FIRE movement. There's not enough like excess in my, you know, in my budget, or I don't make enough money. Like, do you guys have like just like your standard response? I mean, I know that like sometimes when people talk about everyday millionaires, they're like, well, just put $25 into your Roth for 30 years and then watch this grow, you know, or something like that. Do you guys have a standard response that you're like, just do this, or like think about that?
I mean, that's a good question. I do not have a standard response, because I will say I think it is so customized to each individual person and where they are mentally at. So like, I have a good friend who has made comments like that's kind of lives more paycheck to paycheck. And they're not in a place where I think they want advice, you know? And so I don't lay it out, but I believe there's lots of things that could be cut off. There's things they spend money on that I don't ever spend money on. Right. And so, but then I have someone else another very good friend who is like asking for help, right, and wants to talk about this stuff. And so to me, like, one of the things that Mike and I are trying to do is like demystify people talking about money, right? It's such a taboo to some people, and it shouldn't be. And I think so much good can come from talking about it. So much good has come even in my life just from like when Mike and I started talking about this stuff at work. It's what made us want to start this podcast. So I think, the main answer to that question is it's just so dependent upon like who that person is, whether they're ready to receive help, whether they want help, or whether they want to talk about stuff, because it's such a difficult topic to talk about with someone that doesn't believe it's possible. Like, I think that we actually just had an amazing conversation with Joel O'Leary.
No relation.
From he writes
no relation to me.
Mike's brother from another mother, an Australian mother. But he was making a comment. We were kind of asking for like his top tips and tricks, and he kind of started about like tracking your expenses, and then he went back and he was like, never mind. The first thing is your mindset, right? And I think that mindset is so important. Of like I don't have standard advice I give to people if they haven't even kind of gotten to the point of believing that it's possible. I think it can be really hard. And like you guys even got to some point that you believed there was a better way.
For
right?
sure.
Yeah.
And then it like opens up the conversation, so much differently. So Mike, I don't know if you have a standard thing.
Well,
you go
Maggie's much more empathetic and kind than I am. So when people say that to me, I'm like, well, how much money do you spend every month? And they're like, well, I have no idea. I'm like, well, your first thing you should do is start tracking all your expenses so you know where you can find cutbacks. Because it's super easy to spend everything you make. I mean, if you make, you can be living paycheck to paycheck, making $1 million a year. Super easy. So until you get a handle on where your money's going, you can't make any improvements. And then so we are a big proponent of tracking your expenses. Once people do this, even if it's just very basic, like looking at their credit card statement, and then like saying out loud, I spend $2,000 a month on groceries. And then they're like, holy shit, that's a lot of money on groceries.
That's a lot.
I can probably cut that back. And then if I spend $500 a month, I've just now put $1,500 towards savings. So that's kind of the way I usually lead these conversations. But Maggie's much nicer about it than I am.
Well, and also Mike, your example about groceries is one thing that I've personally gotten a lot out of, and heard a lot of friends have gotten a lot out of, is comparing it to other people. So like until you talk to someone else and realize how much they spend on groceries, and they either, have the same number of kids or don't, and they're spending more than you don't have any comparative, like you don't know what good or bad is, right? Like I don't know if $2,000 a month on groceries is a lot or a little if I have no idea what I'm spending.
Yeah.
So as soon as I see like, hey, I've got 3 kids and I'm spending $500 to $600 a month on groceries, and I live in this part of the world or whatever, you get so much by kind of that benchmarking of comparing yourself to other people. And we've done it with like cell phones and other things. Like I love asking someone what their cell phone bill is and being like, I can get that cheaper.
Seriously.
What?
This is
I was
insane.
about to ask y'all what your cell phone bill is.
Yeah.
We'll save it for another day.
It's 45 each, so 90 combined.
I think we could do better.
I think Mike can make it better.
Ooh.
We'll do that as a follow-up.
Yeah, I like
Okay.
that idea.
After we finish the call, we'll go through your expenses line by line.
Yeah.
Perfect. we have some friends here locally that are in our FPU group, and we've started to kind of get them chatting about money, and they did like a 3-month kind of like budget average, and the woman called me and she's like, you guys aren't gonna believe what our food was. And they've got 5 kids, and it was during quarantine. And 2 of their boys, one's a senior in high school, the other one's like a sophomore in college who moved home during the quarantine. But their like 3-month average was like, was it 4,000 or 4,500?
Whoa.
Wow.
It was something like that.
Something really, really
Well, I will
high.
say,
Like
teenage
insane.
boys should be counted as like 3 people
For
in
sure.
the budgeting process. But still, that's
a lot of
really, really high.
Yeah.
But
It was
a lot of money.
insane.
But it took
They should just buy a grocery store for that.
Yeah,
amount.
I told them, like, you guys might as well just go, like, open up your own food truck.
Yeah.
Feed the boys
Totally.
from there. They've got 5 boys. So it's like you might as well just feed the kids from the food truck all day long.
But it took writing it down, listing it, and being like, whoa, that's way more than we ever imagined, for them to even think about it. You know, when you don't think about it, you don't talk about it, especially if you don't talk to other people about it, then you just live in your own reality, justifying everything. Like, it's okay to just go spend $300 on dinner. Let's just go. It's the normal. But when you talk to other people and get their insight on the fact that maybe that was a little high,
Right. Yeah.
then you kind of go from there.
Seriously.
Love that. So I have a question for you guys, and I wasn't going to ask this because we are super, like, against credit cards, but I think it's important to address that, like, there are two different ways to do things. And I've listened to your guys' podcast, and I know that you guys do use credit cards responsibly. And from our experience, the reason we are so, like, never again with credit cards is because we don't know how, well, I'm sure now if we had them, it'd be much different, but we're still never going back. But our relationship with them was so incredibly toxic, and it just was a line of credit to literally just spend. And so I just kind of wanted to chat with you guys from the fire perspective, or maybe not even fire, maybe just from your guys' perspective. Credit card usage, good, bad, how do you manage that?
Oh, I have so much to say about this.
Okay, go.
Well, you could go first.
Okay.
Mike.
A few things. Having credit requires discipline and the right mindset. And so, you know, as I mentioned early on, I've been kind of living this lifestyle my whole life. And so I used to, and still do to some degree, play like the credit card churning game where I get points on airlines. Like, I've gone through hundreds of credit cards, and on any line of credit or any debt, I've never missed a payment ever. It has just never crossed my mind that that is something that's even possible, let alone encouraged. And so once you develop the discipline and the understanding that you need to pay this back in full every single month, credit cards are great because you can get a lot of value out of them. You get cash back. You get benefits on the purchases you make. Like, if you love to travel, you know, you get free checked bags, you're getting priority boarding.
Yeah, I fly for free all the time.
Companion passes. Like, there is so much good that can come from credit cards, but you need to have the discipline. And if you're not there, it's terrible. So I would encourage you guys to, at some point, work your way back in there a little bit.
Well, Mike, you use the term, Haley used the term responsibly, right? If you can use credit cards responsibly, they're an amazing tool. If you can't, then you're right. Like, just cut yourself off. It's like if you're an alcoholic or something, right? Like, some people can't just drink responsibly. They're like, well, I know I just go too far, so I'm going to go to nothing, right? And so I can use a credit card responsibly. And I never really thought about it till you just said it, Mike, but I've never not paid a credit card bill off every month too. I didn't know I never knew there was another choice. Like, when I got a credit card at a young age, it was because it was a convenience factor of, like, that's how you paid for things. But then at the end of the month, you paid your bill. So I never put anything on a credit card that I couldn't afford. It was literally like a mechanism. And then later I learned about, like, you know, points and all that. Now there's, like, I get so much credit from my Amazon Visa card, like Amazon credits, hundreds of dollars, you know, every couple months. And then I fly for free all the time because of my Delta Sky Miles card. And so to me, I'm using the system. What's kind of sad is all those things we're making money off of because we're disciplined credit card users is being made off the backs of all the undisciplined users, because that's how those credit card companies are funding all of those benefits, is through interest payments from all the people who are not able to use them responsibly, which is kind of sad. I don't like that piece of the game. But credit cards are amazing if you can use them responsibly.
If it helps at all, Maggie, you can just picture Haley and I. Whenever you're, like, on a flight, you can be like, Justin and Haley helped out on this flight. All of their not paying off their credit card statements in full.
I had a Delta credit card that I opened up to go visit a friend in Germany because I wanted all of these points. And then I think they gave me like a $5,000 limit, and then it just was like 10, and then it just kept growing along with all my debt. And I do have family members that will put everything on a credit card the entire month, and then that is what they use to kind of track everything and then pay it off completely at the end of the month. And so we can't sit here telling everyone, don't do this, because there's no one way to financial freedom or financial independence, but the way that we are doing it for people like us who cannot control themselves or who don't know better or who have toxic money relationships, I think credit cards are absolutely a horrible idea. But then there's also people who are responsible and do things the way that they're supposed to be done. So then it's not necessarily such a toxic, dangerous thing. But I do think people who are listening need to kind of look in the mirror a little bit and reflect on, where are you on that spectrum? Are you someone who is responsible and pays it off every single month? Or are you someone who, you'll go put a washer and dryer on there and it's okay if you just pay some minimums? Because that is a very slippery slope that can go downhill very quickly.
Yeah, and it's, credit card practices are very predatory, right? Like it's similar, and predatory maybe is a strong word, but they are, right? They're trying to encourage things like that. Insurance companies the same way, right? Like these are for-profit businesses that are making money off of you and trying to just like it's like consumption and consumerism, like every product that's out there, right? Like they're trying to convince you need this and it's going to make you happy and it's going to solve all your problems, and they're taking money from you when you don't necessarily have it to give, and they know that is what marketing is, right? They're preying on something about you and what you believe you want your life to be and how this product is going to give you that. And yeah, it's you've got to be really strong and disciplined to not succumb to that, right? And it's not easy. I think it gets easier over time. Like I think something eventually will kind of click in people where they realize there's another way and there's a better way. Better is just a subjective word, I guess. But I like that to me is what is so interesting about this space, is like I believe this way of life will make people happier. Right. And it's why we like talking about it and doing this.
Yeah. It's kind of like you mentioned as well, Mike, that like, I don't know how to phrase it. I'll think about it in my mind while Haley's asking this question. I just wrote down and see if I can phrase it better. Go ahead.
What do you guys think is the hardest thing to cut when you are on a fire pathway or in the fire movement? Something to cut, or is it? Here's the second side of the question. Or is it that you've already been living this way so that you don't have to cut very much because you're already living a minimalist, frugal life?
Ooh, that's a good... I've never heard this question and I like it.
I know. I'm like, I got a noodle on this. Mike, you go first.
Well, I think it is at two different points in the journey. If you are first starting and you realize that this is what you want to achieve and you want to make a dramatic change in your lifestyle, I think the hardest thing for people to cut are going to be the outward facing social status items. So like if you are leasing a car for, I don't even know what these things go for, like $800 a month. And you're like, if I want to make a change, I'm going to have to get $100 a month car. That's going to be painful for people. But once you're already on the journey, Haley, to your point, you have already made changes in your life. Hopefully you found a sustained level of spending that keeps you happy. And then it's no longer a challenge. It's always, in my mind, it's always, even if there's something that I know I shouldn't spend money on, I don't see it as a painful trade-off, because I'm like, you know what? I can turn this into more money in the future and it helps me achieve this goal faster or better.
I like that. Maggie, what about you? Did Mike give you enough time to think about it?
Yeah, I back to kind of what you started with, Haley, of like, what's the hardest thing to cut? I do think you're right that it's not as hard to cut things once you kind of get to like a new base level minimum, like you realize you don't need as much. And so everything gets a little bit easier over time, in my opinion. Right. It's kind of like if you get used to like, I'm just trying to think of a good like metaphor of like eating less. I don't know what a good example is, but you get used to it, right? Your habits adjust, your expectations adjust. Even just like think about the expectations you set with your kids. Like we have set these expectations with our kids now, where every now and then I'll be like, do you want to go to Target and get a new LOL doll? You would think that it was like they just won the lottery because the bar has been set so low with them of what they will get and how they get it and when they get it, that when they get something, they are that much more appreciative, and they act like they treat that little doll like it is like, the only toy they got all year, even though they get more than one toy a year. But it really does, you sort of like reset your expectations in a way. And so I think it makes stuff easier. But to get really practical or like literal to your question, I like Mike's always trying to challenge me to cut my yard service. I'm like, I won't do it. It's just a time, a complication. We got a lot of hedges. I got a big yard with a lot of hedges, and like, I'm not to the point where that time money trade off is worth it to me. And then I'd say electronics too, of like, I don't have to have the latest phone or anything like that, but like, I'm wearing an expensive pair of headphones right now, and like, these headphones make me happy. I wrote a whole blog post about how happy my noise canceling Bose headphones make me. They make you a better parent, you should seriously consider it. You can drown out the noise of your children, and you're nicer. They have so many benefits. Like,
Love
I'm
it.
in like a sound vacuum when I wear them.
That's too funny.
That's
I
awesome.
meditate with them on. They're amazing. So there's certain things where like I don't want to splurge on. Like, I want good quality. I don't have a lot of stuff, but I want good quality stuff for the things I do have in some categories.
Just for the listeners too, just so you know, Mike has, I think, what looks like just like your standard Apple headphones in. So yeah, there's definitely.
His were like free, and
Yeah.
mine were like $300.
Came with the
but
phone.
I'm happy over here.
I love it.
I mean, I don't have any sleeves. I can't afford like a full shirt. This is like a.
That's great.
But
That's
I do
awesome.
have nice headphones.
I'm stealing that every time I wear a tank top. Hey, I'm working on fire. All right?
Oh, that's good.
That's great.
Saving money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
I'm so glad you guys kind of spoke to it, because you helped phrase my question a little bit better. So I was like, yes. So it wasn't really a question, but it was more of a thought with the credit card usage and kind of talking about discipline. I think that, Mike, like you said, talking about like once you're on the mindset of FIRE and like once you've committed to that goal, then the discipline with a credit card becomes easier, because you're not spending on those social status outward facing things. But when you are not able to like have that goal in mind, or you're not content with where you're at, giving somebody a credit card is just like, here you go, like, finance whatever type of social look you want for others.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I think that's, yeah, I mean, back to Maggie's thought, like it's unfortunate that sometimes the credit card companies are built on those who can't maintain it and do it appropriately, funding the benefits and stuff for others. But if you're on that push towards a goal or towards financial, independence, then you might be able to use a credit card with the right habits to make it a positive or a better experience than the one that we had.
Yeah, it's a great point.
So
Getting better.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
I will say on credit cards too, there are times when a credit card I know could be a savior to somebody, right? Where there is an actual emergency that comes up, and they're able to do something that is critically important that they need. And that's okay if you're then disciplined about paying that off. And before, and again, we happen to be, Mike and I, happen to be, just in the grand scheme of the world, very privileged, I would say. And so I often am very kind of empathetic towards like everyone's lifestyles and socioeconomic status, and everything is very different. And so there's times when a credit card could be, a critical piece of someone's life for emergencies and other things. And again, I think it's the discipline to say, okay, but then you pay it off as quickly as you can before you go do other things that are nice to haves, not life necessities, right? And that is the discipline that is very hard for many people, to your points earlier, because it seems like it's sort of like free money out there in like the, universe that it doesn't feel like a debt that's like, physically weighing on you every day.
Yeah.
So
We've talked, because we follow the Ramsey baby steps, our emergency fund currently is only $1,000. And we've had the hard discussion of like, what if something was to happen to our dogs? And one of our dogs gets, hit by a car or gets some type of need for an expensive surgery. Like, what would we do? And we have said, like, there is no hesitation that we would find a way to make it work. and hammer away at that debt once it shows back up, right? So whether that's like care credit or getting a loan from our credit union, like we simply are not going to budge on that. We're not just going to let our dog die. And the idea of like, oh, we don't want to take care of that credit. And a lot of people, you're right, have those instances, Maggie, where something pops up and it's like, I have no other alternatives, or my child goes without, or somebody else in my family goes without,
right.
or something happens to our home, whatever that may be.
When I was 8 years old, I knocked out my 2 front teeth, and my mom was a single mom, and I was riding a scooter, and it was my permanent teeth. It was a big deal, but getting the retainers for a single mom was just not attainable. She did not have the money. And then I was so young that I continued to break them or lose them, and it just was one thing after another. So that could be another thing that's like, you can't just let your kid go without teeth. I mean, you could, but we really want to make sure that we don't do that. And so that would be another thing. It's like, that's a legitimate emergency. I mean, you could.
Yes. Yeah.
We like our child and her teeth coming in.
No.
Oh, it's too funny.
I thought for a second when you said your mom couldn't afford it that she really made you go with
without
front
teeth,
for a while. Like, learn a lesson, like, Haley, next time you won't fall off the scooter now that you know.
You know what's really funny
That's the sort of thing I would do to my kids.
Every time we drive by a kid on a scooter that doesn't have a helmet on, Haley's like, come on. This is standard practice.
I do that in my neighborhood.
Do you?
I do that in my neighborhood to teenagers on skateboards, and then sometimes my kids will look at me because I don't always have a helmet on when I'm in my neighborhood on my bike. I'm like, I'm always like, well, I have a ponytail and it's hard to get my helmet on, and I'm like, I have years of experience on these bikes, and we're just like, toting around the neighborhood. We're not on a busy road, but every time I see the kids, I'm like, it's not cool. Like, I want to like yell at them, like, put your helmet on.
Where's your helmet?
I know.
I feel like I need to pull over and like let Haley out and give him like the teacher voice.
Yeah, but Maggie, you might be like an experienced bike rider, but you've also fallen while just running. So I'm not sure that you.
I have.
I would recommend
probably
that you wear a
should.
helmet at all times.
Yeah.
Well, I always have my helmet with me. It's in my basket, so I feel like that does
No, it
something,
doesn't.
right?
You need to wear it. You need to put it on your head.
That's another one of my favorite podcast themes for them. It's Mike's car and Maggie's tripping
Falling.
while running. Yeah. So we have one question that we'd like to ask the people that have come on to interview with us, and it's, if you were to put a millennial in the position of your kind of expertise, so to speak, which is we're having you guys on because of the fire movement, and you could put a stop sign anywhere on their path towards the fire movement, what's the first thing you would stop them from doing? What is like, no way, we're not going to let this happen, you're stopping that right now? What would it be?
Maggie, you go first.
Stop inflating
Oh,
your
you took
lifestyle
mine.
and stop caring about. I would throw up like 5 stop signs in their face. Stop caring about what other people think. Stop inflating your lifestyle. Stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. And start trying to keep up with your friends on fire and the price of avocado toast.
Yes.
Okay, Mike, what's your stop sign?
I would agree. You need to stop comparing yourself to others. And it's all sort of the one stop sign: lifestyle inflation, thinking about all the things that you want to buy to make you happy. It's all sort of in the same vein. If you can stop those things, you will save a lot more money. You will increase your wealth much faster. You will see the benefit that having money creates for your life, and it will continue to increase the momentum and the pace at which you achieve financial independence. So definitely lifestyle inflation, full stop.
Full stop. I like
Full
that.
stop.
That's Instagram quotable right there. Lifestyle inflation.
I'd actually
full stop.
You know what? You go for it.
Can I go further than, instead of just a stop sign? Because people run stop signs all day long.
Or roll them.
I want to install.
Yeah, or they roll them.
I want to install those things that like cut your tires when when you like leave a rental car parking garage and you back up or something.
Yeah.
They like spike your tires.
Yes.
I want to install that. That is like, if you don't do this, like, I'm gonna take all the air out of your tires.
I like that.
That sounds mean, but it's from a place of wanting to help.
Yeah, it's a good visual. I like that.
But then there's a legitimate punishment.
Yeah.
And then you need to pay to get your car
Yeah.
fixed. It's Maggie, this is a terrible idea.
Well, yeah, sorry. There'll be like a stop sign, then there'll be a speed bump, then there'll be a warning that soon the spikes are going to
that's
take your
better.
tires out if you didn't
Okay.
listen to like this. So
That's
there'll be
good.
like lots of
There's
warnings.
so many opportunities.
Yeah.
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 But before they really screw their car
Right.
up.
Just a crowd of people on the side yelling at him the whole time. Like, don't turn around. Stop doing this. Yeah, I like that. That's awesome.
So, Mike and Maggie, you are Friends on Fire, but where can our listeners find you? Your podcast, your Instagram?
You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find our podcast, and it's called Friends on Fire. And then you can find us on Instagram at friends.onfire. If you just Google Friends on Fire on Instagram, some other bands and stuff will come up. But
Yeah, but number
we're the
18
only
on the list,
financial
that will be
podcast.
us once you search for us.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll just scroll.
Yeah, keep
a little bit.
scrolling.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Like I said, we really enjoyed your podcast and the stuff you guys put up on Instagram, and we were excited to have you guys on. We appreciate you tolerating our teaching delays and taking some time Sunday morning to sit down with us.
It's the afternoon.
I no
for them.
problem. We
yeah.
it is.
Afternoon.
Yeah, it's 2:00 here. We appreciate you having us on, and we really enjoy your podcast. I actually loved your recent episode about the whole Amway story. I was like I had a mild like quick star, which is Amway experience in college, and it was not nearly as interesting and fascinating as yours was. Yours was like out of a movie.
Yeah, it is insane.
The slow build of like them meeting,
Yeah, it's crazy.
but I was just like, it was a great story, and it was just really good perspective. I've been thinking a lot lately about like just the idea of like hard work versus like these get rich quick schemes and MLM and all that stuff. I thought y'all did a great job talking about what can be a very sensitive topic to many people, because a lot of people are into some of those setups.
What Maggie's
For
trying
sure.
to say
Thank you.
is thank you for having us on your show. This has been
Yeah.
a real
That was
pleasure.
my long-winded thank you.
Such a great opportunity to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, thanks. You guys have a great rest of your
All
day.
right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.
Bye. All right, Toasties, I hope you're feeling fired up after this episode, because we sure are. I'm going to put all of the information for Friends on Fire for Mike and Maggie in our show notes, so make sure you check them out.
And then you can shoot over to our Instagram and use the bio, or I should say the link in our bio, to head over to our link tree, ask us some questions on there, give us some ideas or topics that you want to hear us talk about on the podcast. We're always looking to expand and get into information that you guys want to hear. So hit us up on Instagram over there. That's going to do it for this episode of The Price of Avocado Toast. As always, we are so thankful you guys were here to have this conversation with us today, and we are so proud to be part of this community. As always, happy budgeting.
You've got this, Toasties. Thank you for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. If you vibed with this episode, share it with a friend. We'd love to continue building our listening community.
If you're interested in speaking more with a financial coach, hit up our coach Ryan at MeFinanciallyFree on Instagram. Use the promo code HELP50 in the consultation notes section to receive 50% off.